Welcome back to the Always Right podcast. I am author Carissa DeLay, and this is
This is Jamie Vendera, and I'm not crying. I got something in my eye, and I know we use that
your
excuse when we
finger.
cry. I don't know what it was. I'm like, I'm crying. We're back for another episode.
Your finger's in your eye. That's what's the problem.
Okay.
All right, this episode. Oh, of course, we have to start off with Jamie's drum roll of his metal water bottle.
Try to set it down easy.
This episode, we are going to talk about erasing our words. You know, one of the struggles as authors that erasing our work, holding on to our characters, holding on to that chapter that we took so much time with and just scrapping it. So this is kind of exciting because I didn't do that with my first book, but I'm definitely doing that with his current book. And it's a, man, it is an emotional roller coaster when you have to scrap something you've spent time on.
It's like losing a child.
Because you built something, or even killing a character, you're like, I'm not going to put this character in there anymore. It's just, yeah.
Yeah, because if you've ever, as a writer, sometimes you don't even know. I've been in a story, and I'm working, and because I let it unfold like I'm watching a movie.
Yeah.
Even though we're writers, but we're into it. You know, you do this because it's creative fun. And I've been to that situation where a character's died, and I was like, I didn't even see that coming until I woke up this morning. He's like, ooh, he's got to die.
Yes.
And I'm really upset about
it. Yes. Yeah. Well, yeah, that's a whole nother even topic itself, is like deciding who to kill or who to create this dark energy with, or you build a character in the point like, man, to make this better, this person has to die, or that's a whole nother thing we could talk about. I'm adding that to the list.
Yep.
Killing characters.
Wow. Because our ideas are already coming to me from stories of characters I've killed off, and it's like, why did I do that? But it did add so much drama, and did not see that coming.
And yeah, that's another thing, you know, is deciding when. But let's talk about more specifically erasing say you wrote a chapter and you keep rewriting this chapter. You keep going over this chapter to the point where you're trying to fix things, make it sound better. You know what? Scrap it. Just get rid of it and start fresh. Like the time that you said you had all those words written and
exactly
you lost it.
And you know what? I'm actually glad it happened. I mean, I learned a couple things. That was back in my Microsoft Word days where I focused mainly on there, and I was not smart enough to realize that on my PC, autosave. Didn't have it on, didn't save it. Well, it was 12, 14 hours that day, and the computer just went poosh. And I was like, and it had plenty of power, but it just went dead. Started it up, all going, and I'm like, ugh. I wasted a whole day of my life. And you know, you're frantic. If that would happen to any of you, you're like, okay, what did I write? So I was taking bullet points, trying to remember, and there were some really cool paragraphs I've written. They were never rewritten, because I couldn't remember them. But a good learning experience, because at that point you have to let go. And when you have control of this, you have to know when to let go. You got to know when it's not working. And raise the hands. How many of you have ever read a book and you're like, oh my God, just get to the point already? I mean, there's page after page of this stuff. You're like, why are you even telling me this?
I read a book like that. And we've talked about this earlier in an episode. And I don't want to keep bringing up this author, but it's the perfect example of I know she's a good writer because she had a 3-page sex scene that was super made me blush, and I could feel the emotion. So I know that she was a good writer because she spread out an evening sex scene in 3 pages, but she took 30 pages to tell me that how they met, how they got married, where they moved, went from shopping in October to Thanksgiving dinner in November. All these things happened in 30 pages, but no buildup. It was just kind of I'm like, oh my gosh, what is happening? You know what I mean? But then it went to this. So I was like, what is the point of this? Because there were just random facts here. There was things that I'm like, I don't know what we're doing here. What this chapter is taking forever.
I did that early on. And I remember working with Rich Dalglish and even Daniel Middleton. And they both said to me, Jamie, you have to show, don't tell. And I was telling everything, and it wasn't There was no imagery. I'm like, I walked into a blue room and there was a red cup and I walked 3 feet and blah 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 blah. And
Red
it's just
pill or
like,
blue pill?
yeah, exactly. And I'm like, okay, now the problem that authors have is this is your child. So being a vocal coach, and I'm not being mean, but anyone who brings a child to me, they're like, oh my gosh, let me show you the scrapbook. They sang at 3 years old and they sound like Mariah Carey and blah, 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 blah. You see no flaws in your children.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously so. I understand it. They're your love. That's your life. But you don't see anything in every little thing they do, unless they're getting in trouble, is perfection. So when you're writing, that's your child. And you're like, I can't take this away. My child did this. It took me 30 pages to tell you how they got married. But you need to look at it outside. I mean, if I read my book, and I had to do this in the early days, and I had to be like, okay, don't read it as I'm the author, read it as I'm a fan. Would I buy this? And I got to be honest, some of that early stuff, absolutely
Same.
not.
Same.
Yeah,
When people say, I want to read your books, once they find out I'm an author, I'm like, I always do a full disclosure. Like, listen, I was learning to write. I didn't know how to write. I just wanted to put the words on page, and I didn't care how I got them there. I wanted them there. And then
exactly.
after Rich edited and cut my stuff and things, I'm like, I need to work on things. And
The
the
butcher.
second book, someone's like, I noticed your writing improved. I'm like, okay, I noticed my writing improved, but I still knew that it needed work. And if I could, I would scrap it all and start Crystal Gate and Four Rivers over again. But I'm not going to. I might do
Well,
something.
no, I'm glad you don't, because every author, Stephen King,
Oh yes,
Terry
Stephen
Brooks,
King. He's like, kill your darlings.
yeah, and you got to also realize that every author grows as an author. You're not the same author. Again, I love Terry Brooks, and Sword of Shannara, his first book was like 700 pages long, and it was long. I mean, and I've read it 3 times. It's got a little easier as I've gotten older, but his second book was maybe 400, and now he's down to like 350, 400-page books, and so much quicker, cutting
Mm-hmm.
out a lot of the fodder. So he's killing off of some of his darlings. He's not, he's not married to any character. He's not worried about having a 30-page scene. He can cut it down to 5 or 10 pages, and that's how it should be. So
Well, that's the
you
thing. So, yeah, sorry. Go ahead if you want
no,
to.
you go ahead. You go ahead.
No, with this canvassed one, I have a couple people reading, specifically my friend Christine, and she has an assignment. I'm like, Christine, when you read this chapter, make sure that when you read 1 to 2, that 1 to 2 flows, and then 2 to 3 flows. It doesn't just jump. I'm like, you have to be honest with. Oh, and she's super honest, which I just totally appreciate. And she's not doing it in a harsh way. I know what I'm asking from her. But so I had written a good 18 chapters maybe, and I had like 8 done as far as my revamp, and I sent them to her. And the other day we were on the phone, and I had told her, I said, hey, don't read any more past chapter 2 because I've changed characters. I've completely changed my characters' names. I think I text you, I'm like, okay, I think I'm going to change these characters to these people. What's your thoughts? And yes, do it. Love it. So I told Christine, don't read past chapter 2 because I've changed the characters past that point. I've changed the names of the 2 main characters, like completely. And it wasn't like, who cares chapter or character names people think, but it is important in the story of who I'm using for these characters. Their names have meaning, and I just made it better. And then as I'm taking a pause on writing to finish up my classes, my book is in my head of things I need to add, but adding those things requires me to go back and scrap some stuff that I've worked hard on, but it's going to make it better. So don't be afraid to scrap it. Don't be afraid to throw it away. Don't be afraid to change it, because if it's going to make it better, then all the more, you know what I mean? And you never know if that's going to build to the next point.
And don't be afraid of work, because you could be an author who's like, oh, if I do this, it's going to be 3 more months before I release this book, and I'm ready to be an author millionaire. Would you rather have a quality book and maybe it would still be of quality with the old names, but in your heart and the way you're working the story, so every detail is lined up and in sync, you'll know that the quality is better, and you could attract more readers that way. So I would scrap, I would rewrite, I wouldn't worry about these timelines and thinking, I gotta have this out before Christmas. That will make you rush.
Well,
And
and see,
it
currently one of the chapters there is the two detectives, and I have another visiting detective who was her role was to come in to bring the other detective a box, with that he had like requested, and like this whole process, like this whole entire chapter was built around her bringing this box. Hold on, I'm back.
the box of tissue that he brought her. Bless
About
you.
box of allergy pills. Um, no, so like this whole chapter was built around this, and then like these two characters go to the next scene. Like this chapter was like a continuation into like a further chapters. The problem is, in my mind, I have to change why she's there, what she's bringing, and her whole purpose, because I need her to be somewhere else in the further chapters, and I need the information that's being brought in that chapter to completely change. It's not like a slight change, it's a complete change. Like I'm scrapping what she's bringing. She is there for a whole different reason. He does, so like I completely reworked one chapter that's going to follow through to the next part of the story and make a bigger impact, because I thought, oh, this would be really cool if I did this, but I can't do that unless I go back here and change that.
And you'll be a better author for it. So at the end of the day, you can't be married to your words.
No,
And
not at
I've
all.
been so mad. I've been so mad at Rich so many times, and I've repeated this
He told you
before.
to get like you tries to divorce words.
Yeah, that, or he has me simplify it, or his thing is always, and this is a good tip for all of you watching this. If you read a paragraph and you think it's the most perfect paragraph, you spent 3 hours writing this, make it smaller. What can you cut out? What is not necessary? What can you combine? And I know it may be tedious in the beginning, but if you have a 50,000 word manuscript and it's not edited, can you go through and try to edit it down another 10%, so it's 45,000?
Well, so that's a good point, is editing it to make it simplified, because that, and I know there's a ton of people who love 50 Shades of Grey. So, and shout out to the author who wrote all those books, because I know we know it takes a lot of effort to do that. But one of my challenges with reading was I found myself getting stuck on paragraphs that were too wordy. That I was like, it was almost like an over usage of sentences. Like, you've told me this sentence 3 times, just in different words. So I've seen that with papers that I've edited before, where people are trying to describe things and they over describe the same thing multiple times. And so it's like, just do it once. Like, how can we simplify that?
And I think that kind of mindset is, I mean, it's changing now. Like, I've been writing the movie and TV books, which are much shorter and it took a while because we've been doing that 10 years, and now Kindle Shorts, and there's all these smaller books. People in the past thought, oh, I don't have a novel unless it's 100,000 words.
Well, so, technically a novel's 50,000 plus.
And I cannot see you at all. You went black.
I'm not black. What?
Yep, you're completely blank over on this end.
Okay, well, maybe it's your Appalachian stuff.
Can you hear me? As long as you can see you, then I'm cool with it. So
no, it's just my camera's working. So if anybody's lost my image right now, I'm just like, staring into a blank space.
She's still there with her always right poster behind her, like me. So we're good. So
So some of the things that I want to point out, as far as the starting from scratch, is when you do that. And something I wrote down was a zero writing, which we can get a little bit more into. Zero writing is when you basically tell yourself the story. I don't know if you've ever done that yourself, Jamie, but like you tell yourself the story and you write it down real quick. Like, okay.
All the time.
Yeah. This is what I want to happen. This is okay. You almost restart your brainstorming when you're struggling with a chapter or you're struggling with an ending. You're struggling. Four Rivers. That's a good example. Four Rivers, my best friend back in Ohio years ago, Sherry Beschel, she had read Crystal Gate. She had been reading with me the whole time. And so when I finished, she had been caught up like with everything. So I sent her the final draft of the ending. And I wrote my ending, and she's like, I felt like when you did that, I was hopeless. She's like, I felt like there was no hope, and I didn't really like it. And I'm like, okay, I needed that feedback because I needed to go back and say, okay, what kind of emotion am I trying to portray to my readers? And I don't want them to feel like, I want them to feel like what's about to happen was the main character took her free agency to choose what she was doing. And it wasn't because of this. It was because she wanted to do that. That doesn't mean that it didn't end the love story. Because she's like, when you wrote this, I felt like the love story ended, and she needed the love story to continue. And so I'm like, okay, scrap what you thought was amazing. And you're like, oh yeah, I finished it. Scrap what you thought was amazing and reevaluate what you're trying to portray and say, okay, what are some of the things that help me, like, so do the zero writing. Like I want to portray empathy, or I want to portray compassion. I want to portray confidence in the character, but at the same time do the, and you're like, what kind of things make me feel these ways? Just kind of throw words on things, and then things will start to flow. Your brain will start to kick in, and you'll start to feel what you need to get down. And yeah.
You know how, like, back when we were young, you'd be around a campfire and we're like, let's make up a scary story, and everyone would have to add to it. So you're making it up on the fly. That's kind of what I would do with Daniel Middleton from Scribe Freelance when I started the 7-Eleven Press books. I would call him because he loved the stories, and I may not be finished, but like it could be Age of the Sigil or Crisis Artifact. I'm like, okay, here's the idea I have. And he's so into it, I try to keep going. I'm like telling and making up the story as I'm going to see what works. Like, it's almost like I've already watched it as a movie, and I'm sharing, oh, have you seen the new Spider-Man movie? Well, here's what happens. And I'm telling it like that. So I guess I've been doing a form of zero writing for years, and I just didn't think of it like that. But that's how I always do. I'll have an idea. I run with it. I'll say it out loud. I'll record it as an audio note. I'll tell somebody. Like,
well, essentially, you and I do this a lot with texting. We do zero texting, zero brainstorming.
Well, we know it's zero texting because I use text to speech. And you can't read
I've been doing text to speech as well lately, just because of my
empathy.
On the go. No. But apparently, Siri understands my language of speech than yours. She's like, oh, those are real words. I got it.
Hey, in my defense, I've been slowing down, and someone said the other day, he said, hey, coach, man, your text-to-speech is getting a lot better. I can read this.
It's funny that your students know that, and that they understand that your text-to-speech is...
They all know I use text-to-speech because I literally get 10 to 20 texts a day from students, and they know I'm teaching.
Clarify?
Yes, so I have to, like, blah, 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 blah. Okay, I don't know what greasing the door on Amazon means, but I'm like, no, I said no. I will get to this when I'm done at the end of the day. That doesn't make any sense. I don't know how this turned out that way, but
yeah, you'd think with AI, it would just be like, listen to my brain and know what I want to say.
Exactly. I would be happy. I need an eye temple thing. They need to make that. They just read my thoughts.
I mean, that's a whole nother podcast, but like there's that's the thing. There is a thing based on how the energy waves that you produce that create these things. So like they'll even do MRIs where they're showing you a picture, and then they ask AI to recreate the picture that they saw based on what the brain is producing, and it's so similar. It's crazy.
If I had that, I could put it on and I could finish writing books in my sleep.
Right? Just by osmosis. It'd be great. So what was I going to say? There was this, man, my brain literally went blank for a second.
Must have been a lie. That's what I always say. Yeah. So zero writing is a great way to to restart your writing.
Yes.
After you scrap something.
Yeah. And so that's something that, that when you do that, you may find that you are going to have a better work, and you're going to forget about what it was before. Have you ever done that, though? Have you ever done it where you completely scrap? Aside from the time when you lost it accidentally, have you ever had that with your writing where you're like, you know what, I'm just going to get rid of this part and I'm going to start over?
Not like heavily, but I like if I've had something plotted in my head, like I know this character is going to go into this mountain and find this sword because I do a lot of YA. It may be little things like when I get in there and I'm looking around, I'm like, no, I'm not going to make it a sword. I'm going to make it a battle axe or something. So I haven't done like a complete 180 yet.
What about like when you do songwriting?
All the time, especially when I'm working with students. So I have students and they're like married to their words, and I'm like, okay, but normally you have a verse and you, for some reason, you have 7 lines, and then you get your chorus, but then the next verse you only got 4. Do you see that you're doing something wrong here?
Like the
Well,
pattern?
yeah, well, Jamie, I gotta say this, this, and this. I'm like, well, hold up, watch this, and I'll look at it, I'll understand what they're writing, and I can redo it in 4 lines. They're like, why didn't I think of that? I said, because you're using too much words. We just said the same thing in 4 lines and saved you to keep the pattern. So, and again, that's like, thinning it out, saying it in less, and so it's. I've had to fight some students with that,
Oh yeah.
and then at the end of the day, they're like, "Oh, this is so much better. I get it now." And I'm like, "Look, stick to a pattern." Same thing, when you're writing a book, stick to a pattern. Don't write a 3-page chapter and the next one's 28 pages. That is
So yeah,
so
so
inconsistent.
that's and I have that with Canvas. All
Well,
my
it's all
chapters
right
are
if it's
short.
on purpose, though. Like, and I
Right.
guarantee you don't have a 2-page chapter and a 49-page chapter.
Right. Keep a somewhat of a balance. So
Yeah.
typically I'm a short chapter writer. Kind of like Dan Brown, I would compare myself as far as how I like to shift. Every chapter is a new perspective or a new set of characters or new, location. Um, Very rarely will I be in the same location. Or it might be you jump from like outside something to inside something. But this one with Canvas, the shortest chapters are when the killer is texting someone or the killer is doing something. I keep it very one page ish, very short, kind of mysterious and dark. Those are just like just a simple like behind the scenes. I'm envisioning like in a movie where it would be like you just see a glimpse of what the character's doing.
And I can see what you're doing that. What I do, I don't turn it into another chapter. If I'm changing scenes and I have to interject, like, hey, we haven't looked at these characters who are on having this problem, and it may be a 1 or 2 pager. I'll like do the asterisks in the center, or I'll
Hmm.
skip like 2 lines so it's another section. We're completely shifting gears,
Yeah.
and then I'll go back because I'll look at it. I try to keep chapters pretty much in the same area. I can't tell you if they're long or short. I haven't even thought about that. I have to look at one of my books to figure out what I do. But I do know they're pretty close.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I have a but like when it comes to so we're back to the whole erasing. Um when I had like I said I have like 18 to 22 chapters of Canvas written and I as I'm going back through and I started this book like maybe 10 years ago, 8 or 10 years ago, like shortly after Four Rivers. And then I stopped writing it to finish Before the World Was Lost. And then I picked it back up recently. Um, and sorry, guys. And I literally have had to like rearrange chapters and like put things in a timeline. And then I had a chapter that I wrote and spent so much time because it was the professor. I was introducing the professor and he teaches film. And I so badly wanted to, there was a reason I wanted the professor to talk about like the anti-heroes of the 70s to kind of introduce my readers into what an anti-hero is. So I used the movies of the 70s with the anti-heroes in it. And I wanted to put some of the movies with lead male roles, but I wanted to have like a feminist flip on it. And I was spending so much time trying to get this in there that it was like so long. And I'm like, I feel like I'm getting lost in this pointless chapter. And I'm like, all right, I've got to cut this, even though I've spent a lot of time researching these movies. And I wanted my readers, because most readers haven't watched Clockwork Orange, I wanted my readers to have a small debate in their head about free agency of the main character in Clockwork Orange. But I was like, do I really need this? I just need a hint of it. I don't need to have like this main debate about it. And so I scrapped a lot of it, like probably half the chapter.
So if you did that and then you would go back and read your own book as a fan, you wouldn't be saying, "Oh my God, get to the point."
Well, that's how I did it when I reread it. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is going on forever. It was boring. I was like,
Okay.
even though I was very interested when I was writing it, because I'm like, oh yeah, this is great. I'm going to have this, like, the students debating with the professor. Like, I'm going to have, like, these are your assignments. Like, a couple of the people in the class didn't want to watch Clockwork Orange because of the violence. And so there was a small debate where I wanted to show that the professor was like, listen, you were given the option in the beginning of the course to know whether you were going to watch these movies or not, and you chose, yes, I'm going to accept and watch these movies. So now you're held accountable for it. It's kind of getting into his personality, how it's like, these are the rules. Everybody has to follow them just because you're a girl. And it was kind of like he's an attractive professor, and they're trying to be like flirtatious, like, I really don't want to do this, professor. And he's like, I don't care. But I can portray that completely different with less words.
And that's how you should approach it. So
when I thought of that, I was literally thinking about, in my head, Indiana Jones, when you meet Dr. Jones, when you meet him in his professor setting, you've got these girls that are like, oh, Professor Jones. You've got this whole look of how they see him. Because I have that kind of mentality where you have this professor, but he's completely does not care about these girls swooning over him. So I wanted that whole, like, someone's coming in effect, to where it's just a short introduction to who he is outside of his relationship with one of the other characters. So I had to introduce him, but I can do it in a shorter way. So don't be afraid to scrap it, just to make it,
Yeah, you don't have to be married to this. Think about quality of the book and would you read it?
Yes.
That's at the end of the day. If you read your own wording and you're like, oh, gosh, why am I taking so long? Because you can't go into it with ego or attitude. You got to go into it with an open mind and accept it as another author. That's how I read my stuff. I pretend it's another author, and would I enjoy it?
I've been making notes today, and we've had so many things that have just, like, popped in my head. I got to double check to make sure.
Well, that means we'll have more podcasts.
Mm-hmm. Well, so yeah, I've added killing characters to our set list. And I'm pretty sure I have this on our set list as knowing your audience, but I just put it down there to double check it, because knowing your audience is a key point. And I know we briefly discussed it in a previous episode, but knowing your audience and how to write, like, essentially, don't write for your friends.
Yep.
So, all right. So do you have anything else you'd like to add about erasing things?
Not really. Just don't be upset when your computer dies and you didn't have autosave on.
Yeah.
But again, don't be married to your writing. There's nothing wrong.
Just your work in general.
Yeah, because you're creating art. You're creating a story, so it's not already set in stone. Mm-hmm. You're allowed to play with this. And if you come up with an idea, it's like, I wish I would have done it this way. Don't be afraid to tackle the work and redo it, even if it takes you several more weeks. So what? And
don't be afraid to take a day away from that chapter and come back to it. Or
that's another subject. Yeah, because I'll do that a lot. I'm like, okay, for me, when I'm structuring fiction or nonfiction, it's bullet pointed. And if I'm stuck on a chapter and I'm just not feeling it, I'm like, I'm kind of tired and bored of writing this. I'll think, but I really like this idea, and I'll jump to another chapter,
mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Because I don't have, what is it? Man, you just took the word right out of my mouth. Writer's block. You're blocking me from saying that. I had a writer's block about saying writer's block. I don't believe in it, though. It's you're either bored or you're passionate about it. So
yeah. Well, so that episode drops soon. So we officially dropped our podcast last week. This is like several episodes ahead of that. We just have recorded so many ahead of time. But our official drop was last Thursday. We have one dropping today. We have one dropping next Monday. And then we have one next Thursday. So, and I think it's next week. Not obviously, it would have been in the past. So we're just time traveling.
Yeah, so now that she's telling this, we're actually going back
in time, right?
Yeah, back in time. We're repeating what you already know.
Several weeks ago, we dropped the writer's block one, and so I added a poll. There is a poll which there's a poll on, like, I'm going to put a lot of like questionnaire type things at the end of the podcast where our listeners can add and give us their feedback, and we'll kind of revamp those in future episodes where it's like, this is what our readers were saying, or our listeners, not our readers, but our listeners were saying. And so I'll have the, do you believe in, writer's block?
Of course she will. She's got to try to beat me in everything because, she can send me books, but I feel for you when all my fans, because I want to make all my Singer fans go follow it and say, click no, click no, click no.
No, you better make them be honest. You better make them be honest, because I mean, like, you can't sway the outcome. That's
hey, if you're watching this and it's in the future, go back in the past and click no. No, I'm just messing with you. I got to catch up.
That's
so,
funny.
All right. Well, we hope you've enjoyed this podcast. I always love doing these with Carissa because we have so much fun.
Yes.
And I'm sure we'll see you soon in another podcast.
Yes. Thanks for listening. I'm author Carissa DeLay. And until next time, you can reach out to us on any of our social media. You can email us at alwayswritepodcast@gmail.com. And feel free to look forward to our next episode. Subscribe so you can keep up and make sure that you're getting all those new updated episodes. So see you next time. And this is who?
I'm Jamie Vendera. Don't forget to click no.
All right. Goodbye.